Professor Christian Edger,
That's me.
thank you for joining us in our studio box this evening.
Thank you very much.
You are from the Birmingham City Business School.
Yes, that's correct.
And you are the director of the Academy of Multi-Unit Leadership and Strategy.
Yes.
Perhaps you could just explain to us a little more about what that means.
It's born out of a central insight, actually, that 70% of the UK's economy is service. And within the service economy, there are huge retail, leisure, hospitality companies. They run multi-brand, multi-site organisations, and within those organisations, which are dispersed, run at a distance, it is difficult to maintain consistency, execution and engagement at a local level. And what we do is we educate middle managers, principally big box unit managers, area managers, retail directors, about how you can maximise service within a multi-site context, how you can grow the business, how you can stimulate organic growth, especially on a local basis. And it's proved to be very successful so far.
So you're talking very much about localism.
One of the insights, the books refer to localism, certainly the first one, local leaders. I call my area managers on my courses, fantastic guys, local leaders, because that's what they are. They operate in a locality, they have a set number of units, there is a certain demographic, there is an idiosyncratic product portfolio that can be deployed in those areas. There were nuances, especially in terms of building. Every building practically will be slightly different for various reasons, and they can make a huge difference. They are local leaders. They take the corporate frame and apply it in a local sense to optimize the portfolio. And the best area managers, the best retail directors, the best unit managers actually look at their context first, and they're in an organization, they might be in a retail chain or a leisure chain. There are certain things that they have to do in terms of execution, but there are lots of other things that they can do locally in terms of community activity, in terms of if they've got the flexibility up to 30% of their portfolio, a product portfolio, taking it locally, optimizing the local labour market. This local connectivity is absolutely essential now, especially in an age where, to a certain extent, everything had, in some sense, it had been commoditized to death, had been standardized to death. Every high street looked the same. Everything was sameness. Well, actually, what you're tending to find now is that large companies are encouraging divergence and trying to fit into local communities and in local areas.
So it's not just a question of actually being in the locality and then being successful. It's a question of having to be in a locality and to make a very conscious effort to integrate yourself, to understand that, to bring your expertise to bear in that.
Absolutely.
market.
Faceless corporatism is not going to work in today's environment at all. And that businesses have to give their units the flexibility to reach out locally on a whole number of levels, using social media, which is a great weapon. What you've tended to find up until now is that many corporates have been very reticent about allowing local businesses to connect, but that's starting to open up. And as I say, depending on what type of concept we're talking about, if it's food retail, actually taking in more product from the local area, benefiting the local supply chain in terms of demographics, employing perhaps leisure companies, coffee companies and so on, taking on youngsters, unemployed youngsters, training them, giving them vocational apprenticeships, charity runs, collecting money for charity and so on and so forth. It is not I could give you a plethora of examples, even some of the largest companies in the world, take Starbucks, who at one stage had a pretty homogenized offer and approached markets in a one way. Their boss, Howard Schultz, has said over the past 3 years that really they're going to create stores that are more fit to the local environment. They're going to be differently designed, they're going to look at range, they're going to look at product mix, they're going to look at local taste, local nuances and so on. And they've done a tremendous job, actually. The problem possibly in the past has been this degree of complexity that has, companies have shied against that, because the whole principle of chain is economies of scale. That you do everything the same, one way, and it's the most economic way.
Yeah.
But actually, consumers react against that. And certainly with Generation Y and the millennials and so on.
Yes.
Take Nando's, for instance. Every Nando's restaurant is designed differently. It looks different. There's an ambience, there's an atmosphere to each restaurant which is idiosyncratic. And I think that's quite profound.
So you've mentioned several things here. You've spoken about new media, social media.
Yeah.
You've spoken about the importance of using that in the locality. You've spoken about Generation Y and bringing them in. And so it's not just a straightforward question of applying yourself and understanding the locality. It's about actually putting some structure to what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And as a merchant, as a builder's merchant,
Sure.
is this the sort of thing that would apply?
Oh, absolutely. In terms of, let's take builders merchants and the areas in which they operate. And, I've been very lucky to have a great association with Saint-Gobain for the last 4 years. You've got to look at each individual market. What is the housing stock? What is the infrastructure? What are the industrial demands in that area? Where are the big builders, sited? Where are the small businesses and the small builders? What are their requirements? What's the history of the area? What's the legacy? What's the, the infrastructure legacy in the area? Understanding the needs. What type of stone? What type of aggregate? What type of... one size fits all is fine for a number of staple products, but there are approaches, and certainly if you take this fantastic conference which you're sponsoring, the independents are still flourishing. Good independents are still doing very well. Why? They are differentiating. They are going niche. They're understanding local needs. They provide great service. Yes, they're not always as competitive on price, but actually they are very intimate with their customers, and they know their customers on a local basis. And actually, that's something that Saint-Gobain, personally, I think have done a tremendous job in moving towards over the past number of years. And I think that's what the big boys have been trying to do. Of course, it's very, very difficult. What you've got here is a lot of family-owned businesses, some great longevity of relationships and customer intimacy, which really give them competitive advantage. But yeah, local, marrying up central and economies of scale with local insight and matching those local idiosyncrasies. If you can do that, nirvana. I mean, absolutely fantastic.
So in merchants, we have the challenge with recruiting
Yes.
youngsters and to
Yes.
provide a service, the same as any sort of retail outfit.
Yeah.
We're talking about school leavers very
Yes.
often.
Yeah.
And is there enough engagement there? And if there isn't enough engagement...
Peter, it's a really good question. Actually, it doesn't just apply to merchanting. I would look at the entire service sector in terms of entry-level jobs. There has been an issue in the sector for decades. There's been this perception by youngsters that very often they're dead-end jobs, low-paid jobs. They don't go anywhere. They're not being invested in. However, I think that's changing a bit now. Certainly over the last few years, government initiatives on apprenticeships, great industry initiatives, and I know that the BMF have invested in a lot of schemes which say to youngsters, you know what, join us and you're going to have a 3 or 4 year training program. You're going to have structured development. There's going to be structured career development with what you're doing. And that, if you take hospitality, the same has happened there. If you take large companies like Whitbread, who've announced enormous apprenticeship schemes, and taking in school leavers, even A-level leavers, and taking them in, and people are taking that option rather than taking degrees and taking on a burden, even as a professor at a university, actually saying, well, you know what, this might lead to a first degree within this organisation. So I think companies, we're often criticised in the UK and having a lack of youth training, a lack of investment. I'm seeing that change, mainly because, not only because of social need, but I would turn it because of commercial need. Actually, a lot of industries have realised that if they're to build talent and talent pipelines, and a lot of companies, they've got to invest at that level. and it's actually economic sense. If you look at, we did, one of my guys on the dissertation, the master's dissertation, looked at apprenticeships in one organisation, and there was a 5 times greater chance of stability and individuals staying beyond 3 years if they did apprenticeships than if they didn't. It is, and in addition to that, in that organisation, if people stayed in units, food quality goes up, service goes up, there's a link to sales. It makes commercial sense. Investing in people makes commercial sense. And if people can see a route through, we can transition people through the industry far more effectively than we've done in the past. Things are changing, in my view, not fast enough, but the green shoots are there.
But we see in retail the e-commerce, and we see the changes with internet trading, merchanting perhaps coming behind mainstream retail somewhat. But
now this is very interesting. You know, it's debates that we've had with some clients for a number of years in terms of adoption. And the argument that the industry's made is that many of their customers aren't sufficiently attuned, or you know, certainly 4 or 5 years ago, weren't part of the digital revolution. I would say that although these customers weren't first adopters, they will be, and they are increasingly making price comparisons, location searches, and there's a lot of, actually there's quite a lot of research that could be done around and insights garnered from catch up. And you know, I certainly know, and empirically some of my students have looked at this, that the industry better get, you know, better get on it quickly, because what you don't want is a situation where it's search, and it's certainly in retail at the moment, where people are really making all their decisions, purchasing decisions online. And the industry is going to have to think very, very carefully in terms of way. Now, you could say there are other things that make this industry different, i.e. need on the day, a need on the job, immediate need, and so on and so forth, which actually makes it not necessarily comparable. Availability is important, and you've got some big ticket items that need to be transported out. So service, transportation, availability still feature very highly, but yeah, you know, the industry, some of the users and some of the operators in the industry haven't necessarily been first adopters, but actually, you know, it could be a threat, but it could be a great opportunity as well.
emphasizing the need to engage with Generation Y,
Yes.
and to bring them into the business, who surely are the first-hand users of technology, familiar with technology, blending that with the experience in a merchant.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here in terms of, do we want to sort of, geek up in this industry? This is, this is a pretty serious industry, okay? I mean, safety first, number one. There are some big, heavy items floating around in this industry. The site management is a big issue. Yes, we need a combination of people that are coming into the industry. I'll tell you, somebody said something quite profound to me, one of the HR directors in this business. He said, do you know, there used to be a time in this industry 30, 40 years ago that when we took apprentices on, we made them build a wall, right? So they understood that when customers came in and they described a problem to them, they could actually understand and had the tacit knowledge and could point out solutions because they had an insight into construction. And I would go back to that, which is actually there's an opportunity in this industry, we talk about digital, but actually for those with building and construction knowledge, actually to act in an advisory capacity to people who are actually doing it. And I think what's being done with apprenticeships and the foundation degrees and the diplomas and so on and so on is great, in conjunction with those technical skills, is really going to accelerate some companies faster than others, in my view.
So understanding the climate, putting solutions in place in the way of training and support is what we've really got to be focused on to
Yes.
maintain progress in this market sector.
Yeah, and you know, talking about you're talking about entrance into the business and into this industry. It is a great industry in many ways. Does it sell itself well? Well, like hospitality, I don't think that it hasn't done in the past. However, let's look at the figures. You know, we're now into another growth spurt, which is probably going to last, you know, with its ups and downs, another 6 or 7 years. Look at the capacity in the market, the building capacity, the need for infrastructure, new housing. This sector has got a lot of legs, you know, and the supply, the supply chain into these building works has got huge traction from an extremely low base 3 or 4 years ago. And if we're looking at sort of compound growth of 4 or 5% a year over the next 6 or 7 years, it's a tremendous opportunity for people who want to get involved in the industry, and the industry has to sell itself. It has great prospects.
Professor Edger, I think we could talk all night, but
We could indeed.
we better not.
Let's go and have a drink.
Thank you very much for your time.
Peter, thank you.